Well, tonight I'm continuing um, reading what I read yesterday that didn't get recorded. So that's great. And hopefully tomorrow, when I try and use Google Video again, it'll be working because I don't like this going live stuff. It makes me a little nervous. I get stage fright. Anyway, on Friday, April 12th, I dined with Johnson at our friend Tom Davies, where we met Mr. Craddock of Leicestershire. I believe I pronounced that correctly. Leicestershire. Author of Zobeide, a Tragedy. A very pleasing gentleman, to whom my friend Dr. Farmer's very excellent essays on the learning of Shakespeare is addressed. And Dr. Harwood, who has written and published various works, particularly a fantastical translation of the New Testament in modern phrase and with a Socinian twist. Socinian, Socinian. Wow, there's one person watching this, and now it's nobody, so it's just me and dead air. That's great. See, I get distracted by this stuff. There's like comment section, 0 people watching. Sorry. I introduced Aristotle's doctrine in his Art of Poetry of the, and there's some Greek words, the purging of the passions, as the purpose of tragedy. See an ingenious essay on the subject by the late Dr. Moore, Greek professor of Glasgow. But how are the passions to be purged by terror and pity? Said I, with an amused air of ignorance, to incite Johnson to talk, for which it was often necessary to employ some address. Johnson answered, Why, sir, you are to consider what is the meaning of purging in the original sense. It is to expel impurities from the human body. The mind is subject to the same imperfection. Passions are the great movers of human actions, but they are mixed with such impurities that it is necessary they should be purged or refined by means of terror and pity. For instance, ambition is a noble passion, but by seeing upon the stage of the man who is so excessively ambitious as to raise himself by injustice is punished, we are terrified at the fatal consequence of such a passion. In the same manner, a certain degree of resentment is necessary. But if we see that a man carries it too far, we pity the object of it and are taught to moderate that passion. My record upon this occasion does great injustice to Johnson's expression, which was so forcible and brilliant that Mr. Craddock whispered to me, "Oh, that his words were written in a book." Now, I'll have you know, last time I read that section, I read it very eloquently yesterday, but it didn't get saved, so moving on. I observed the great defect of the tragedy of Othello was that it had not a moral, for that no man could resist the circumstances of suspicion which were artfully suggested to Othello's mind. Johnson answered, In the first place, sir, we learn from Othello this very useful moral, not to make an unequal match. In the second place, we learn not to yield too readily to suspicion. The handkerchief is merely a trick, though a very pretty trick, but there are no other circumstances of reasonable suspicion except what is related by Iago of Cassio's warm expressions concerning Desdemona in his sleep. And that depended entirely upon the assertion of one man. No, sir, I think Othello has more moral than almost any play. Talking of a penurious gentleman of our acquaintance, Johnson said, Sir, he is a narrow, not so much from avarice as from impotence to spend his money. He cannot find in his heart to pour out a bottle of wine, but he would not much care if it should sour. And they're talking about, according to this footnote, Sir Alexander MacDonald. Johnson said he wished to see John Dennis's critical works collected. Davies said they would not sell. Dr. Johnson seemed to think otherwise. Davies said, as of a well-known dramatic author, that he lived upon potted stories and that he made his way, as Hannibal did, by vinegar, having begun by attacking people, particularly the players. Footnote tells us this is Murphy he's talking about. Davies reminded Dr. Johnson of Mr. Murphy, having paid him the highest compliment that ever was paid to a layman by asking his pardon for repeating some oaths in the course of telling a story. Johnson and I supped this evening at the Crown and Anchor Tavern, in company with Sir Joshua Reynolds, Mr. Langton, Mr. Nairn, now one of the Scotch judges with the title of Lord Dunsinane, and my very worthy friend, Sir William Forbes of Pistolgo. We discussed the question whether drinking improved conversation and benevolence. Now, this is also a very painful section for me because I gave a very good reading of this one. That's fine. Sir Joshua maintained it did. Johnson said, "No, sir. Before a dinner, men meet with great inequality of understanding, and those who are conscious of their inferiority have the modesty not to talk. When they have drunk wine, every man feels himself happy and loses the modesty and grows impudent and vociferous. But he is not improved. He is only not sensible of his defects." Sir Joshua said the doctor was talking of the effects of excess in wine, but that a moderate glass enlivened the mind by giving a proper circulation to the blood. "I am," said he, "in very good spirits when I get up in the morning. By dinner time I am exhausted. Wine puts me in the same state as when I get up, and I am sure that moderate drinking makes people talk better." Johnson said to this, "No, sir, wine gives not light, gay, ideal hilarity, but tumultuous, noisy, clamorous merriment. I have heard none of those drunken, nay, drunken is a coarse word, none of those vinous flights." Sir Joshua said, "Because you have sat by quite sober and felt an envy of the happiness of those who were drinking." Johnson said, "Perhaps contempt. And, sir, it is not necessary to be drunk oneself to relish the wit of drunkenness. Do we not judge of the drunken wit of the dialogue between Iago and Cassio, the most excellent of its kind, when we are quite sober? Wit is wit, by whatever means it is produced, and if good, will appeal so at all times. I admit that the spirits are raised by drinking as by the common participation of any pleasure. Cockfighting or bear baiting will raise the spirits of a company, as drinking does, though surely they will not improve conversation. I also admit that there are some sluggish men who are improved by drinking, as there are fruits which are not good till they are rotten. There are such men, but they are meddlers. I indeed allow that there have been a very few men of talents who were improved by drinking, but I maintain that I am right as to the effects of drinking in general. And let it be considered that there is no position, however false in its universality, which is not true of some particular men." Sir William Forbes said, "Might not a man warmed with wine be like a bottle of beer, which is made brisker by being set before the fire?" "Nay," said Johnson, laughing. "Ah, I cannot answer that. That is too much for me." So Johnson is a good sponsor for teetotalers. I observed that wine did some people harm by inflaming, confusing, and irritating their minds, but that the experience of mankind had declared in favor of moderate drinking. Johnson answered, "Sir, I do not say it is wrong to produce self-complacency by drinking. I only deny that it improves the mind. When I drink wine, I scorn to drink it when in company. I have drunk many a bottle by myself, in the first place because I had need of it to raise my spirits, in the second place because I would have nobody to witness its effects upon me." Moving on, he's told us almost all his ramblers were written just as they were wanted for the press, that he sent a certain portion of the copy of an essay and wrote the remainder, while the former part of it was printing. When it was wanted and he was fairly set down to it, he was sure it would be done. So Johnson is also a patron saint of procrastinators. He said that for general improvement, a man should read whatever his immediate inclination prompts him to. Though, to be sure, if a man has science to learn, he must regularly and resolutely advance. He added, When we read with inclination, makes a much stronger impression, what we read. If we read without inclination, half the mind is employed in fixing the attention, so there is but one half to be employed on what we read. He told us he read Fielding's Amelia through without stopping. We have here an involuntary testimony to the excellence of this admirable writer, to whom we had seen that Dr. Johnson directly allowed so little merit. Johnson said, "If a man begins to read in the middle of a book and feels an inclination to go on, let him not quit it, to go to the beginning. He may perhaps not feel again the inclination." Sir Joshua mentioned Mr. Cumberland's Odes, which had just been published. Johnson said, "Why, sir, they would have been thought as good as odes commonly are if Cumberland had not put his name to them. But a name immediately draws censure, unless it was a name that bears down everything before it. Nay, Cumberland has made his odes subsidiary to the fame of another man, Mr. Romney the painter, a footnote tells us, who has now deservedly established a high reputation." Johnson also said they might have run well enough by themselves, but he has not only loaded them with a name, but has made them carry double. Once again, I'm third time now, or I guess the second time. I'm confused by what's going on in that section. Cumberland wrote some odes, and he made them subsidiary to the fame of another person. It was Mr. Romney, but I don't know what that means. Anyway, we talked of the reviews, and Dr. Johnson spoke of them as he did at Thrale's. You recall that from a week ago, don't you? Sir Joshua said, "What I have often thought, that he wondered to find so much good writing employed in them, when the authors were to remain unknown, and so could not have the motive of fame." Johnson answered, "Nay, sir, those who write in them write well, in order to be paid well." Soon after this day, he went to Bath with Mr. and Mrs. Thrale. I had never seen that beautiful city, and wished to take the opportunity of visiting it, while Johnson was there. Having written to him, I received the following answer. To James Boswell, Esquire. Dear Sir, why do you talk of neglect? When did I neglect you? If you will come to Bath, we shall all be glad to see you. Come, therefore, as soon as you can. But I have a little business for you in London. Bid Francis look in the paper drawer of the chest of drawers in my bedchamber for 2 cases, one for the Attorney General and one for the Solicitor General. They lie, I think, at the top of my papers. Otherwise, they are somewhere else and will give me more trouble. Please to write to me immediately if they can be found. Make my compliments to all our friends round the world and to Mrs. Williams at home. I am Sir, your, etc., Sam Johnson. Search for the papers as soon as you can, that, if it is necessary, I may write to you again before you come down. Now, yesterday I ended here on this great cliffhanger. What's in these papers? What do you think? It's a treasure map or something? But today I'm going to keep on going forward. So this is uncharted territory. I did not read this yesterday. It's new to you and me this time. On the 26th of April, I went to Bath, and on my arrival at the Pelican Inn, found lying for me an obliging invitation from Mr. and Mrs. Thrale, by whom I was agreeably entertained almost constantly during my stay. They were gone to the rooms, but there was a kind note from Dr. Johnson that he should sit at home all the evening. I went to him directly, and before Mr. and Mrs. Thrale returned, we had by ourselves some hours of tea drinking and talk. I shall group together such of his sayings as I preserved during the few days that I was at Bath. Of a person whom differed from him in politics, footnote tells us this is Burke, Johnson said, in private life he is a very honest gentleman, but I will not allow him to be so in public life. People may be honest, though they are doing wrong. That is between their Maker and them. But we, who are suffering by their pernicious conduct, are to destroy them. We are sure that Burke acts from interest. we know that what his genuine principles were. They who allow their passions to confound the distinctions between right and wrong are criminal. They may be convinced, but they have not come honestly by their conviction. It having been mentioned, I know not with what truth, that a certain female political writer, footnote tells us this is Mrs. Catherine Macaulay, whose doctrines he disliked, had of late become very fond of dress, sat hours together at her toilet, and even put on rouge. Johnson said, "She is better employed at her toilet than using her pen. It is better she should be reddening her own cheeks than blackening other people's characters." Ooh, sick burn. Johnson told us that Addison's wrote Bruegel's papers in the Spectator at least mended them so much that he made them almost his own, and that Draper's, Tonson's partner, assured Mrs. Johnson that the much admired epilogue to The Distressed Mother, which came out in Budgell's time, was in reality written by Addison. Quoting Johnson here, "The mode of government by one may be ill adapted to a small society, but it is better for a great nation. The characteristic of our own government at present is imbecility. The magistrate dare not call the guards for fear of being hanged. The guards will not come for fear of being given up to the blind rage of popular juries." Of the father of one of our friends, footnote tells us this is old Mr. Langton, Johnson observed, "He never clarified his notions by filtrating them through other minds. He had a canal upon his estate, where at one place the bank was too low. I dug the canal deeper," said he. Johnson told me that so long ago as 1748 he had read The Grave, a poem, but did not like it much. I deferred from him, for though it is not equal throughout and is seldom elegantly correct, it abounds in solemn thought and poetical imagery beyond the common reach. The world has deferred from him, for the poem has passed through many editions and is still much read by people of a serious cast of mind. Footnote here about the poem. I am sorry that there are no memoirs of the Reverend Robert Blair, the author of this poem. He was the representative of the ancient family of Blair in Ayrshire, but the estate has descended to a female and afterwards passed to the son of her husband by another marriage. He was minister of the parish of Athelstford, where Mr. John Home was his successor, so that it may truly be called the classic ground. His son, who is of the same name, and a man eminent of talents and learning, is now, with universal approbation, Solicitor General of Scotland. A literary lady of large fortune, footnote tells us this is Mrs. Montague they're talking about, was mentioned as one who did good to many, but by no means by stealth, and instead of blushing to find its fame, acted evidently from vanity. Johnson said, "I have seen no beings who do as much good from benevolence as she does from whatever motive. If there are such under the earth or in the clouds, I wish they would come up or come down. What Soame Jenyns says upon the subject is not to be minded. He is a wit. No, sir, to act from pure benevolence is not possible for finite beings. Human benevolence is mingled with vanity, interest, or some other motive." He would not allow me to praise a lady. Says here in the footnote, this is Miss Peggy Owen, who was then at Bath, observing, quote, "She does not gain upon me, sir. I think you're empty-headed," unquote. He was indeed a stern critic upon characters and manners. Even Mrs. Thrale did not escape his friendly animadversion at times. When he and I were one day endeavoring to ascertain, article by article, how one of our friends, footnote tells us this is Langton, could possibly spend as much money in his family as he told us he did, she interrupted us by a lively, extravagant sally on the expense of clothing his children, describing it in a very ludicrous and fanciful manner. Johnson looked a little angry and said, "Nay, madame, when you are declaiming, declaim, and when you are calculating, calculate." At another time, when she said, perhaps affectedly, "I don't like to fly," Johnson said, "With your wings, madame, you must fly, but have a care, there are clippers aboard." How very well was this said, and how fully has experience proved the truth of it. But have they not clipped rather rudely and gone a great deal closer than was necessary? And that's over my head. All right, one more paragraph. A gentleman, footnote tells us this is Boswell himself, expressed a wish to go and live 3 years at Otaheite or New Zealand in order to obtain a full acquaintance with people so totally different from all that we have ever known, and be satisfied with pure nature can do for man, what pure nature can do for man. Johnson said, "What could you learn, sir? What can savages tell but what they themselves have seen? Of the past or the invisible they can tell nothing. The inhabitants of Otaheite and New Zealand are not in a state of pure nature, for it is plain they broke off from some other people. Had they grown out of the ground, you might have judged of a state of pure nature. Fanciful people may talk of a mythology being amongst them, but it must be invention. They have once had religion, which had been gradually debased. And what account of their religion can you suppose to be learned from savages? Only consider, sir, our own state. Our religion is in a book. We have an order of men whose duty is to teach it. We have one day in the week set apart for it, and this is in general pretty well observed. Yet ask the first 10 gross men you meet, and hear what they can tell of their religion." Okay, that's good. I mean, it's not good, but it's over. Till next time, bye from Boswell. Oh, now I'm going to awkwardly stand here when I figure out how to close it.